When it comes to Caitlyn and Tyler and the whole situation surrounding Carly's adoption, I feel like they are handling it in the worst way possible. Don't get it confused. I fully understand the nuance of the situation because I have gone back and I have watched those early seasons where they were giving her away, like when Caitlyn had first given birth to Carly and they were in the hospital, and Brandon and Teresa, the couple that adopted their daughter, were in the hospital waiting to be able to see Carly for the first time, and Caitlyn and Tyler were crying and they were literally babies. If you go back and you watch those episodes, they were babies. They were only 1 year older than what Carly is now. Carly's 15 and they were 16. I'm sure they experience a lot of regret. I'm sure they feel a strong sense of betrayal. I mean, they were two very young kids. They were poor. They came from terrible families, had terrible parents, and they thought the life that they were living was the life they were always going to live. They never thought they were ever going to make it out of where they came from. They were young, they were pregnant, and they were surrounded by a bunch of adults who, instead of saying, you know what, we've never really been worth a damn for these kids. So why don't we, for the first time in our life and the first time in their life, get our shit together just enough to be able to support them until they can get on their feet and provide a life for them and their child. Instead of saying that, they instead encourage and coerce and really kind of manipulate Tyler and Caitlyn into putting Carly up for adoption because they didn't even want the responsibility of having to care for Tyler and Caitlyn. They damn sure didn't want the responsibility of having to help take care of their child as well. So it was just easier for everyone if they gave away the baby, right? And I truly empathize with the fact that they, at that point in their life, felt like they had no options. Compound that with the fact that they have gone on to make millions of dollars or something like that. They are now capable of providing her with a better life than they probably were even trying to get for her by putting her up for adoption to begin with. I mean, they were putting her up for adoption hoping she could live in a nice neighborhood and go to a good school. They could provide her with any life she could ever imagine now, but they can't because they gave her away. And I can't imagine what that feels like. I can't imagine having that always in the back of your mind. But I also understand the fact that Tyler and Caitlyn's behavior, if I was Carly, and this is just my personal opinion, would be like partially frightening and partially like a slap in the face. Because Caitlyn uploaded a bunch of screenshots of text messages that she was spam sending to Brandon and Teresa. Brandon and Teresa just were not responding, and they eventually ended up blocking Caitlyn. But the text messages were essentially a bunch of pictures and videos of them playing with their children because they went on to have multiple other kids after giving Carly away. And the text messages were essentially like, oh, tell Carly we all just got back from our trip from California and we miss her so much. Oh, we had such a great day today. Tell her that we miss her so much. Here's a video of, Tyler playing with our daughter. Our daughter's laughing so hard. I'm sure Carly would love to see it. And it's like, I can't imagine having biological parents that gave me away because they didn't think that they could provide a good life for me, just for me to have to spend the rest of my life getting constant updates as to how great and amazing their life is. And I understand that that's probably not the way that Caitlyn is meaning for it to come across, but it would be like such a punch in the gut if it was me. Like, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not trying to speak for Carly. And it's just like the level of entitlement that Caitlyn and Tyler feel when it comes to Carly is frightening because it's almost as though they don't actually understand what adoption is. They almost seem to have this bad habit of treating Brandon and Teresa as if they were just like these long-term babysitters that they just allowed to stand in their place until they were ready to take Carly back. And I know there's a lot of tension and a lot of resentment around the fact that they did have an open adoption, but from what I could tell, they only had an open adoption for the first 5 years. And then after that, it was basically kind of up to Brandon and Teresa's discretion as to whether or not they wanted to continue to keep in contact. And Brandon and Teresa were not comfortable with being all over the TV show. They did not want to be on Teen Mom. They did not want to be on 16 and Pregnant. They really wanted to try to give Carly as normal of a life as possible. They didn't want her blasted all over TV. And from what I could tell, Tyler and Caitlyn kind of consistently crossed their boundaries. They were consistently talking about her publicly. They were always making like personal private visits and stuff a public spectacle. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think the cameras went with them one time when they went to have one of their visitations with Carly. And it's like, the part I feel like they don't even want to acknowledge, let alone accept, is the fact that Carly is not y'all's child anymore. Y'all are her biological mother and father, but y'all are not mommy and daddy. Y'all are not the ones who wiped every tear, who put Band-Aids on every boo-boo, who kissed the foreheads and took the temperatures and gave the cough medicine and read the bedtime stories. And if you think just having like a biological connection to her is gonna take precedent over the people who raised her since birth, I feel like they're just going to consistently set themselves up for failure. Because I feel like the harder they try, the more they're going to eventually end up pushing her away. Because I feel like an 18-year-old Carly, right, who maybe wants to reach out and try to reconnect, is not going to be as open to reconnecting if she's met with, your parents were liars, they betrayed us, they manipulated us, we always loved you, and they wouldn't even respond to us. You know what I mean? I feel like that's not going to be received well. And I feel like Catelynn and Tyler are in a way kind of like emotionally stunted or like regressed, because they seem to always only talk about their trauma and how things affect them and how things make them feel and what it does to them. And I feel like they never look at it from Carly's point of view. They never take into consideration how things could be making her feel. They view it in the way of like, oh, you're depriving Carly of our involvement in her life, instead of pondering the possibility of her maybe not wanting anything to do with them. Because to be completely honest, Catelyn's going off like every few years to retreats and stuff like that because her mental health is always like crumbling. And Tyler's on OnlyFans after all the years they talk shit about Farrah. And I'm not a fan of Farrah, but come on. So like, is it that much of a stretch of the imagination to think that a 15-year-old Carly, who's probably going through puberty and hormones and boys and school and friends and extracurriculars and maybe grappling with the reality that she is adopted? Because even if people have amazing parents, you know, amazing adoptive parents, and they live an amazing life, sometimes people still do like internally battle with the reality of the fact that they were adopted. So is it really that hard to believe that maybe while dealing with all of the things that you deal with during one of the most awkward stages of being a girl there is, which is puberty and being like, what, like 12 to 17, 18 years old? Is it really that hard to believe that maybe she just doesn't want the added stress, the added drama? That maybe it just really is too much for her? Like, I think it's easier for Catelynn and Tyler to try to believe that Brandon and Teresa are these monsters who are trying to deprive them of access to their child than it is to realize that she stopped being your child the moment you signed that dotted line. And yes, we can get into how the system is corrupt and how it takes advantage of young kids like that who have children very early in life, and how it takes advantage of people who are poor, and it manipulates people into doing things that maybe had they had more support they wouldn't have done. But at the end of the day, you offered Carly the opportunity to go out and live whatever life she chose, a life without having to be connected to you and your familial history. And I think it's very important for them to remember to respect that. Whether the life she chooses to live is reaching out at 18 or in her 20s or in her 30s or whatever the case may be, or if the life she chooses to live is her never reaching out a day. That is the choice you gave her when you put her up for adoption. And I just feel like the harder they push, the less they're going to get what they want.